Hey,
Hey,
you ready to do this?
let's go.
I think you and I have been waiting to have some of these conversations since 2016 when we first sat next to each other in the Judiciary Committee in the
Oh my
Capitol.
gosh.
Yeah, those
We were
were
so young.
those were some late nights, some interesting conversations,
Yeah.
and above all else, I think it taught me to look for things in common with people that I wouldn't necessarily think I'd agree with, and I
Yeah.
think it's resulted in a long friendship for you, which has been a really important relationship for me.
Thank
I
you.
was honored to support you when you ran for mayor. And now I'm really looking forward to having an opportunity to have some of those conversations you and I have always wanted to have about things that we may not agree on so much, but I think teaching each other and teaching others ways to have conversations about important issues, and I think that's really an important conversation I'm looking forward to having with you.
Well, I wouldn't do this with anyone besides you.
Yeah,
And as you know, when I was a freshman legislator coming into the building, I intentionally sat next to you as the ranking Republican and Joe Salazar, who was the vice chair of Judiciary at the time and my mentor.
I thought you just sat next to me because I was short.
It did make me feel taller.
Okay, yeah,
And you did have those apples that you, after a while,
I
started
did,
sharing
I
with
know.
me. And that became our thing. But I wanted to hear what you had to say and really understand where our differences were because I knew we would find synergy. And once we did, we'd be
Right.
off to the races. And quite frankly, we were. And now, since we've left the Capitol, I will say people always ask me, you're still friends with Cole Wist? Like, what is that about?
Yeah, I get scolded about it. I mean, I got a "What the heck are you doing?" More times than you can know when I was supporting you for mayor, and people would say, "Well, you can't possibly agree with her on all the issues," and I said, "No." But what I can tell you is that I care about how somebody thinks,
Yeah.
and I care about how they make decisions and include people. And one of the things that I think our friendship shows is that you can, I think, be a more effective leader if you expand the folks that you listen to. Not
Yeah.
necessarily because you're going to agree with them, but I think because you're learning and gaining information.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you, for me, even though you were the ranking member and you did lead the Republicans, quite frankly, you had a moral compass that
Thank
I
you.
understood.
Thank you.
And when you would talk about your daughters, and I know we'll get into some of that,
Yeah.
I realized that it was more than just party. It was really about your core values. And that's how I lead as well. And
Right.
so we had that alignment. And that's why we're here today, is to show that we can have these conversations,
Right.
that we can have disagreements, but we can also have alignment where maybe folks don't think that we can. But we don't always have to push to the middle. We just got to get to what we think is right, quite frankly.
And I think both political parties, Leslie, let's face it, are messed up.
Yeah.
They aren't necessarily focused on solving problems. Sometimes they're more, uh, what's more important to folks in elected office is winning the next election rather than really focusing on fixing problems. And I don't mean to sound cliche when I say that, but it's probably one of the reasons why I left the Republican Party because I don't see the party really working on solutions. And I know you've had some of your
Yeah.
own frustrations with the Democratic Party.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I feel like we both talked about where the spine is on both sides.
Right.
And for me, there's just not a clear remembrance that, quite frankly, it's the people that come first. And we need to focus on making sure that people can feed their families, people can live good lives. And that has been lost in the debate a lot. And so I'm just here to, have real conversation. So, but I also want to make sure that people understand that, the title of the show is Politics is Personal for a reason, that we are people,
Right.
that these issues are personal to us. In the Capitol, we were told never to marry a bill, and I never quite understood that because why would I work on something that I didn't really care about?
Right.
And we do care about these issues. So before we get into the tough stuff, though, what have you been doing since you left the Capitol?
The most important thing that's happened to me is I became a grandfather, which is really an awesome thing.
Oh,
Watching my daughters grow, continuing to practice law. I've gotten to go to Europe a couple of times, which is great.
wow, Europhile.
I spent 30 plus years raising kids. So, my wife and I have decided that we really want to travel and see the world while we're still young and can walk and do all those things that you need to do.
Yeah.
But, on the political side, I've continued to remain engaged and tried to make a difference where I can, tried to speak out for more collaborative dialogue and more respectful dialogue. it's a really tough time to be, trying to talk about that stuff, though.
Yeah. And you've been active on social media. You've been kind of, again, staying engaged. For me, I've just been traveling a lot. I've been enjoying kind of building this, I guess, global community,
Right.
particularly around the arts. Still engaged in politics and policy, of course, especially in my home of Denver and Northeast Denver. And I've also been working on producing films with some folks that folks will hopefully meet that are behind the scenes here and
Thanks for
telling.
asking me to be in your film, by the way.
There's still time.
Okay.
How do you feel about being a schoolmaster?
I'll get you in touch with my agent. We can talk about
Okay.
it.
All right. All right.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And so that has been pretty fun to transition from writing a bill
Yeah.
that creates the Colorado Film Incentive and expands it to actually being a part of this growing film industry has been really fun. And that has helped us to be here today because so many folks who are part of the industry are really helping us to push this conversation forward. And so I look forward to the conversation.
Same.
I know we've got some fun stuff coming up. And yeah, just looking forward to getting into it with you and with everybody else who's listening.
I think when people hear the title of the show, Politics is Personal, they may think that what this is going to be is, we're going to get antagonistic with each other and with guests. We may disagree with each other, and we may disagree with guests, but I think the way that we do that is really sort of the personal side of this, and that is there's not an aspect of politics that doesn't touch human lives.
Right.
And I think it's really sort of the personal side of policy that we want to kind of help to bring to light through conversation. So I look forward to going on this journey with you.
So the premise of this segment is really to look at what's in our feeds because as a Black queer woman, I am almost certain that my feed looks a little bit different than yours. Now this week might be a little bit different because I gotta tell you, Cole, what's in my feed is all about the White House Correspondents' Dinner. The shooting, what happened with the president, and all the reporters that were in the room that went through the chaotic moment that was that night. And so I'm assuming that's also very much in your feed, maybe a different take, but that's what's been in my feed. And I got to tell you, well, I've got a lot of things to say about that. There's been conversation and discourse about whether or not it was a security failure or it was a triumph of security, whether or not it was real or if it was fake. But what I do know is the reporters that I've talked to that were in the room, the trauma and the terror was truly there. People were definitely afraid for their lives.
Right.
Whether or not people think it was real or not, they felt it as very much real. And I know we're seeing that play out in the discourse today.
Well, gun violence is ever present in our society. Yeah. We spend a lot of time talking about that in the Capitol. I sort of committed the mortal sin of a Republican legislator to talk about guns and mental health, but we continue to see guns and mental health being at the forefront, and it's just staggering to me that we can't seem to come up with better solutions to protect our citizens. Separate and apart from whether or not more could have been done to protect those up there, I think it's great that certainly no one was seriously injured, but the fact that the president immediately pivoted
to the ballroom.
Right.
Right.
And isn't it interesting that last night the president hosted the king at the White House. They had a nice dinner. There was plenty of elbow room. It didn't look to me like they needed a ballroom.
Correct.
So why do we need this ballroom? And it was just so, it was just comical, frankly, that rather than focusing on, hey, how lucky we all were that no one was seriously injured in this shooting, no, we were going to pivot to the ballroom,
Yeah.
which is just staggering.
And it's interesting that there even was a pivot, right? Because
Right.
from my perspective, and again, what's in my feed is conversation about Republicans not caring when there's been school shootings, right? Not caring when there's been shootings in our community and thinking about creating schools that are safer or making sure that there is mental health care for our communities and for our kids and for people who need it, right? And now all of a sudden there's action that wants to be taken after this White House Correspondents' Center shooting, and that action is a ballroom with Trump's name all over it. Not to mention, the same time he rolled that out, he also rolled out the fact that he wanted to put his face on thousands of passports across people's passports across the country. And it's staggering. It doesn't make any sense. And quite frankly, I'm going to be honest with you. I think that the reaction to the dinner and his press conference right after is a reason why a lot of folks on my feed think it was a hoax or think he was in on it. Because when you pivot directly from not worrying about your own safety or the safety of the people or your wife or folks in the room to this is why we need a ballroom, it seems fishy.
I mean, honestly, I don't think it was a hoax, whatever that word means, and God only knows what we mean by hoax anymore after the way that word has been misused. But
Yeah.
I think the important point here is that our president is not focused on the things that matter to most folks. It's probably why his approval rating is in the toilet right now in the low 30s. And that I saw a video today in my feed talking about farmers in the heartland who, a lot of them voted for Donald Trump, who feel betrayed by this president, who feel like he's not focused on affordability, he's not focused on diesel prices, he's not focused on the fact that farmers need fertilizer for their crops. And that fertilizer's got to come through products coming through the Strait of Hormuz. And our president is not focused on the right things. So, it was something else in my feed today was Pete Hegseth up on Capitol Hill trying to explain yet again the rationale for going to war in Iran. I don't know what the rationale was at this point, other than I think clearly we were doing Israel's bidding.
Right. And for me, the other thing that's been in my feed is the Voting Rights Act. And I know you and I talked a little bit about this. And as someone who is an attorney, I'm really curious your perspective, because the symbol of what folks are saying is the gutting of the civil rights of the Voting Rights Act, is powerful, right? I walked and marched with John Lewis when he was here in Colorado and multiple other times, and we passed legislation in the legislature to support the Voting Rights Act here in Colorado, and any touch of that seems sacred a bit, right? And so there's a lot of concern about what is really in the opinion. And as I have not been able to read the opinion yet, and I know you have, but I'm wondering, what should we take away from the Supreme Court's decision that happened just today on the Voting Rights Act?
Well, first of all, I haven't read the opinion. I need to.
Yeah,
so
it just happened.
as a good lawyer, I should go do that. But I mean, as with any Supreme Court case, I think people should take their time before they jump to conclusions and decide that this is some cataclysmic event or it's the end of the Voting Rights Act. Let's all pause. Let's go read the decision. But there's so much happening right now in terms of voting and elections. We've got gerrymandering going on both sides, and Virginia did their thing, and now I guess Florida is thinking about doing their thing.
I mean, in Colorado, we did our thing too. I mean, we created this kind of independence when it comes to how we're drawing districts and all of that as well. And so while we went a different direction, we did do our thing around what the Voting Rights Act would look like here in Colorado and what that meant for fairness.
Right. Well, the other interesting thing happening here in Colorado is that the Republican Party here seems committed to alienating as many voters as they can because they're still resisting having unaffiliated voters vote in their primary, which just seems crazy to me. The fact that 49% of voters in our state, I'm in this camp, are not affiliated with either party. It seems to me that the best way to maybe recruit somebody to your side is to let them vote in your primary, but the Republicans here don't seem to be on that page.
At all. And I think it's interesting because you're right. The majority of folks in Colorado are not affiliated with a party at all. And so we want to make sure that there are people who are voting in our elections, who are participating throughout the entire process. I do feel differently, though, about caucuses. I don't feel like independents should be able to participate in party caucuses. And I know that my party doesn't necessarily agree with that either.
Yeah.
But the caucuses are a very antiquated thing. Now, we can talk about whether or not we need to have caucuses or not, but they are so party centric that if you don't want to join a party, and that's completely fine to be independent, I'm a Democrat, you're independent. But that is for the party. And I do believe that that should stay the same.
You know, one of the ways that we're going to be able to have conversations each week is to bring in a guest and to have some dialogue with our guest, and to explore perhaps some areas where we may agree or disagree. And I look forward to that conversation here later today.
All right, Cole, tell me about the first guest.
Well, you and I have sat across the table from this gentleman many times with a microphone. It'll be kind of funny that we get to do the interviewing this time.
Yep.
But our good friend Tony Kovaleski is going to be joining us. Tony has been on the Denver scene for many, many years as a celebrated and award-winning reporter. He's covered a lot of very interesting stories. Look forward to having some of those conversations with him today, not only to hear maybe some more stories about what he worked on, but his perspective on what's happening with journalism today, and where media is going, because I think those are very hot topics.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to him no longer chasing me down a hallway and us actually getting to sit down and talk with him about these really important and fun issues. So let's get into it. Hi, Tony. Welcome to Politics is Personal.
Hi, Leslie. Hi, Cole. I'm honored to be here for your first show. I don't know how many other people said no before me, but what an honor. I am so impressed with what you're doing. I got a personal story for you, right? When President Trump was shot in Butler that day, July 13th, right? I was at a family event, a graduation, everybody there in California. And one of my family members sees me on the sidewalk, I'm walking, and says, the president's been shot. And I'm like, oh my, and I go to my phone right away to see what was going on. And she says, but you can't talk about it inside because there's Republicans and Democrats and everybody will fight.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's horrible. This is our president, whether you like him or you don't. And the concept that you guys have thrown out to talk about politics, and it's okay to have a different opinion. Learn from the other side. I mean, I'm a news junkie, as you can figure out, and I flip between Fox and CNN and MS Now, and there's different voices, but I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
So congratulations.
Thank you. We really do believe that the lack of dialogue is part of the reason why we're here today. The reason why the country is where we are, honestly, today is because people are not having the conversations that we need to have, and also remembering that we're all people first.
Exactly, and that's the beauty of and really how both of you met. I mean, the Apple story you shared, I like that, but I mean, we have to have conversations. And the day after the election, right, I'm unaffiliated. I can tell you I voted both sides of the aisle since I was elected, since I was able to file a ballot when I was 18. I vote for leadership generally as a president, and I am just fascinated by how far apart our country is right now, and kind of a little disappointed. And after the election in November last year, I called some of my hardcore Democrat friends, and I actually said, what the hell, right? And I said, do you realize, and this really poked the bear, you might get angry here.
Well, you did call me, so.
Yes, I did. but I said, the Democrat Party elected Donald Trump. And whether you want to accept that or not, and Cole's eyes got big there, but I was poking bears, right? And there were a lot of things that happened that created that vote. And I like poking on both sides, but what you were doing, what we are doing, it's important to learn. One hardcore Democrat said to me, the party must step back, look in the mirror, and change some of its positions, because she agreed that what happened was a product of a lot of unhappiness and some pretty serious political mistakes. You might not agree.
Well, listen, I think that it's a combination. I think that the Democrats didn't consolidate their message in a way that the Republicans are really good at, quite frankly, and that the American people didn't think that anyone was going to really fight for them. So why not have this guy who seems like he fights for whatever he's fighting for in office? And so I think there's a lot of reasons why we are where we are and why Trump is in office. I don't think we could just blame the Democrats, but damn, I would like to see them doing more right now.
I appreciate the candor. I mean, and you look at history, right? Typically, presidents serve 2 terms. They run for re-election, they win. It's hard to lose as an incumbent president. You just look at history. And the past 3 cycles, we've elected first-term presidents 3 times in a row. What's that say?
Yeah, one of the reasons I got interested in politics as a youngster, I grew up next door to my grandmother, and in a small town on the Western Slope. And my grandmother was a delegate to Democratic National Conventions, and we worked on campaigns, and I watched conventions with her when I was a kid. But she did have 2 rules. The rule number 1 was be informed, and rule number 2 was have an opinion. And from her standpoint, and she was fine with not agreeing with your opinion, but that it was our duty as citizens to be informed on issues, to form opinions, to talk about those. That's what our system of government requires, and we are failing miserably as a country. First of all, we have leaders that aren't leading in a way that we want to have those conversations, right? But we've got to get back to that. I think it's something Leslie and I are committed to, and you know, we appreciate you coming along for the ride here.
No, the invite. I love talking politics. When I was at Denver 7, we did, and Trujillo and I did some political shows every week, and I love the discussion. I like poking the bear, right?
I know.
And going both ways. But you know, I have 3 daughters. You were talking about grandkids and that beforehand. I now have 4 grandkids, 3 born in the past year, which is amazing.
It's a good gig.
But it is,
Yeah.
it is. And I told all 3 of my daughters, since they could vote, your responsibility is to vote, because that gives you an opportunity to have an opinion.
Right.
And whoever wins the election as president, I believe they're our president, even if it was the person you didn't vote for. And in 4 more years, if they don't do the job you want, you get to vote again. But I think that's one of the challenges with this country. Whoever wins, if a Democrat wins, the Republicans work to unseat that person the entire time. If the Democrat wins, the Republicans do the same thing. It goes back and forth. And I just wish we could be America first. I think the State of the Union address was embarrassing for our country. We won the gold medal in hockey for both the men and women, and somehow that became political. How did that happen?
Well, because it was made political. I
It's
mean,
pretty political when the FBI director ends up in the locker room after the election, or after the gold medal game. That was just embarrassing for our country, frankly.
yeah, it's all. I mean, quite frankly, there's so many things that were embarrassing.
Yeah,
That speech was embarrassing. The way that he played the men against the women, and even afterwards, was embarrassing and was unfit of this country, but also the work that they put in to win that damn medal and bring it home for us, like they have time and time again.
Why couldn't we just celebrate both of them and not let it be political?
But we didn't, and that shows the leadership, right? I mean, there's one person that made a determination about what that speech looked like and who was going to be honored that night, right? The one person, and there's one person to who could have turned it around the next day if a mistake was made. I mean, we talk about giving grace, give grace, and then don't dig deeper and deeper into that hole. And I think that's not happening either. I think I don't know who is in the room with our president who actually challenges him. And I think that's also a problem. The challenges might be happening on Twitter and on social media, and people are saying whatever they want, which they would never sometimes say to people's faces, you know, and I think that's a huge problem. But like, he doesn't allow anyone around him to disagree with him. And I think good leaders, good politicians, good presidents, good governors, good electeds have people in the room who they don't always agree with.
Well, Abraham Lincoln built a cabinet of rivals. And we've always had good government when we welcomed diverse opinions. I'm hoping the next president, whether it's a Republican or a Democrat, not talk about the other party as the enemy, not talking about the press as the enemy.
Couldn't agree more.
Right.
You know,
A unifier.
right.
Right.
And we can disagree. And look, we've disagreed about issues for as long as the United States has been a country. Our founding fathers had very spirited disagreements in the Constitutional Congress about what kind of government we were going to have. I mean, these were like knockdown dragouts, but at the end of it, they found ways to come together. I don't think it's too late for our country that we can't do that again, but we are at a really critical point It'll be absolutely fascinating to see what happens with the elections this year, and how I think we're destined to have at least a Democratic House, and maybe that's an opportunity for us to start learning how to get along again. Maybe,
and that's why I think that this podcast that you guys are doing is so critical as we move forward to November, because there's going to be so much discussion. And you guys promoting that it's okay to have different opinions and for people to talk. I mean, that's part of the reason I'm honored to be with you today, is because I think the concept of what you're doing here is right on, and it's what we need.
Thank you for saying that. You were an award-winning journalist here in Denver for many, many years. And I'm just fascinated to hear your perspective on the state of journalism in this country. What does it mean to be a journalist? My daughter went to journalism school at the University of Missouri.
I got to work with her.
Yeah.
A great journalist. So I hear a lot, yes.
And I appreciate good journalism. I guess I'm concerned that we're losing something in our country when, first of all, when politicians openly attack journalists. But what does it mean to be a journalist in this country, and what's the future of journalism?
Well, the attacks on journalism and fake news, it resonated to me. I know that because there were people I tried to work with on stories years ago in Trump's first term in office. And I actually had a woman, great story. She said, "You're fake news." I said, whoa, wait, what? You're painting us all with that brush? And I will tell you, I think some of what Trump has said about what has happened in the national media is valid. There's reason for him to say that. I've watched election nights and results come in, and I've seen anchors on the networks. You can read their body language. And if a Democrat was winning, they were celebrating and get the champagne out. And if a Republican was winning, it was like, where's the casket? And that's not objective. That's not what I learned when I went to journalism school. I learned to let people make their decision, present both sides. And I think in my stories and part of our friendship.
I'm sorry. So say that again, real quick. You're saying that the media celebrates when a Democrat wins and casket when a Republican wins?
I've watched election nights, Leslie, and I've seen the body language on CNN, on ABC, on CBS,
Fox
on
News.
NBC. Well, Fox, you know what you're buying when you're turning to that channel, right?
I don't know if I agree with that.
Just like when I turned in MS Now, I expect to see that. But when you're talking about the major networks, Walter Cronkite, when I was young and watching TV, it was objective journalism. And we can go back and watch some election night coverage. And if you can't read body language when it switched from one candidate to the other.
I think it's different with Trump, and I'm going to be honest with you. Okay. And I see it when they're reporting on maybe someone in Virginia or someone in California. And with Trump, it's different because I think the journalists knew how bad the country was going to be with him, what we were going into. And quite frankly, politics is personal. And so while you guys can be independent, there is still a person behind that. And someone, it's fine for me as a real person who is okay.
Objectivity, don't I?
Maybe, but what's subjective about grabbing him by the pussy and not wanting a president who's okay saying that? But, quite frankly, I think we've lost the decorum, and I agree with you on some of that. But when you have someone like Trump, and you see visceral reactions because folks are just like, how could we do this? Why is our country going this way? And I think many of those media folks, and I know them personally, looked inward to say, did we f this up? Did we do something wrong?
On that argument, did they not, Leslie, in that first term, because he was the celebrity, he was a reality TV host, when he first came out and announced he was running, he was the darling, right? Oh my God, Donald Trump is running. And you could make an argument, and I think it's a decent argument. They helped elect him that first time,
But that goes to show you that it did go both ways. It's not the Democrats or the Republicans or the media is more one way or another. I don't think that's true.
I'm talking about election night when the numbers are coming in.
Right.
Go back and watch body language when it's shifted from Biden leading to Trump leading.
Right, and I
when
understand
it shifted
that.
from
and I'm telling you
Hillary
why.
leading it was.
I'm telling you why I think that happened, because as I spoke with some of the people who did do that coverage, they felt so confined by the regulations around media and having to show balance when there is no balance in some of the things that he was saying, that they felt like they were stifled in how they could cover this election, and they felt like there was a loss there somewhat because of that.
But isn't it the voters' responsibility
and
to
I
look
believe
at
that the beauty of Trump's campaign was that he went outside of the media too and did all the Joe Rogans and the Tucker Carlsons and all of that, and they didn't have to have balance. They didn't have to try to balance things. And I think that that's how his message got out and overcame the message of any Democrat that was running, much less Kamala. But
she turned down the request to go on Rogan.
I'm not saying she was right. I'm not saying she was right. I'm saying, why are they going?
She was worried about how long they were going to talk.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you there. I think she should have. I think she should have gone on. But what I'm saying is, what does that say about media when the better outlet is one that is not confined by the FCC or by this need for fake balance, and folks are going to podcasts, folks are going out.
You said an interesting thing when it comes down to media, and you were talking about Joe Rogan and podcasters in the same lane as what I would consider to be credentialed professional journalists.
Yeah.
I guess my only question is it a good thing that everyone who wants to be a journalist or a media personality gets to grab a microphone, have opinions, project those to the world? Is it okay for that person to be on the same par as someone who's a professional journalist, someone who's trained as a journalist like you, and you worked as a professional journalist? I didn't go to journalism school. I went to law school. But how do aren't there differences between the training that someone receives as a journalist and someone who just has a microphone and starts spouting off views?
There clearly are. And the lines, Cole, to your point, they're blurred right now because we don't put on Channel 7 or Channel 9, we're professional journalists. Yeah. This is, and so you get your cell phone out, your feed starts coming, right. and they come across like they're professional. And now with the addition of AI, right, you talk about people, when major breaking news happens, I hear people say, I'm wondering if it's real or AI, and they've got to go looking to confirm it, right? Mm-hmm. So to your point, it's very blurry right now, right? Sure. And you hear, if you tune into Fox or MS Now or CNN, sometimes you'll hear hosts say, the mainstream media, and they don't consider themselves part of the media, but yet their information and people are tuning in and they're presenting facts and they cover breaking news. And so, where is that line? And not everybody is as astute as the two of you that can differentiate, right? Other people see it and it's just fact, right? And so it's a confusing world out there when you talk about brokering information. Cole, it's a question a lot of people are asking right now because things are changing and really fast. You go back in history, right? We talked about Walter Cronkite before. Back then, there were just 3 channels you could choose from. You didn't even have a remote control where you could make the decision, I'm changing. You had to get out of your seat and go turn a dial. So there was tremendous control of the message by those 3 and a whole bunch of old white guys in one room deciding what you get to watch. Now, fast forward to where we are right now, you've got all these channels to choose from. You can pick your news by your politics. If you're a Republican, I'm watching Fox. If I'm a Democrat, I'm watching MS Now. And those messages are clearly different on the very same issues. Then you look at what's happened to radio right now, podcasts like this. People are getting in their car instead of listening to the radio and the news, and the big change all across the country there. They're tuning into their podcast, right? Yeah. And hopefully to this one. But you take all of that, and then you've got the advertising dollar, which pays for broadcasts, newspapers, radio, and it's diluted. And it's diluted to a significant point where TV stations across the country, and the word on the street is that no longer can markets support 5 TV stations, the big markets, right? There has to be consolidation. I think it's a product of reality, right? If TV stations love to go back to where there was just 3 networks back then, and they just waited for the money to show up at their doorstep for advertising. Now it's not that way. Radio stations the same way, the newspaper the same way, right? What did Craigslist do to the Denver Post, right? Have you bought a Denver Post lately, it's not enough to line your hamster cage, right? And so the dollars are being spread out, and TV stations have got to do something so at least some can survive. It's not ideal. There are not as many investigative reporters in the market now as there were when I got here in 2001.
More are leaving.
So that concern is valid, but I believe, and people ask, my daughter's in the business, and she's an investigative reporter at 7 now, and why would you have her do that? Well, the value of journalism is never been more important, and I think it will survive. But right now, it's in a major evolution, and we all just need to buckle up.
All right, guys. I think that might be all of our time that we have here today. But do you have any final words, Tony?
You know what? Just keep doing what you're doing, and I hope a lot of people tune in. And that, back to my first point about families, I think it's healthy to talk about politics, and it's healthy to have different opinions. And the story about how the two of you met, I just love, right?
How did we meet, Tony?
You're on two specific different sides of the aisle, right?
Yeah.
You sat next to each other in the legislature, and Cole wanted to hear your perspective, and you wanted to hear hers. That's as healthy as it gets, and we need more of that. Your opinion's not wrong, your opinion's not wrong. You both researched, you have your positions, and that's healthy. That's what makes our country the best country in the world. Right. And we just have to promote that. So thank you for this podcast, and good luck. I see great things for you guys in the future.
Well, you're not going anywhere, Tony.
Right. Thank you, Tony. I mean, look, it's so funny because we kind of started our relationship and friendship in a bit of a conflict, and now we're here today.
You mean when you came after me pointing because you're angry at one of my stories?
Exactly. I chased you down a hallway. I turned the tables a little bit, and that's what I do. That's just a little bit of Leslie. But
and what did I do after that? I said, hey, let's go out and have a cup of coffee.
You did.
And we had a drink.
And we had a drink, and we grew from there. And now we are welcoming you on as our executive producer for Politics is Personal.
That's exciting. I'm happy to be part of it.
Thank you for coming, and thank you for being on the show today. So let's talk about what's bugging us. What's bugging you today, Cole?
Is there a time limit?
Let's keep it brief.
Okay. Well, one thing that's bugging me right now is that we have candidates that are running for important statewide elected office. They don't feel that they need to go out and participate in forums and to express their views. That is incredibly frustrating to me as a voter. It's incredibly frustrating to me as a former elected official that we have candidates for important office who aren't engaging and debating with other candidates. And frankly, I think it's disqualifying. We shouldn't be electing people based on what talk shows they go on. People should be engaging with real voters, talking about real issues, and debating their opponents.
Listen, I'm going to keep it real. I know exactly who you're talking about and exactly what you're talking about. It's Jenna Griswold. And as you know, we're on different sides of this race. And what I will say as someone who ran for mayor, when I had to do 4 or 5 forums a day and could not speak to my actual voters on a regular basis because I was in forums every single day getting 3 or 4 or 5 minutes to be quippy and not really actually get to the heart of the issues that matter to Coloradans. I don't think that she has to be at every forum. And quite frankly, what happened to the days where people agreed to say we're going to have 4 or 5 or 6 forums throughout this election cycle, and we're going to focus on those, and the rest of the time you're going to actually be able to put boots to the ground and knock doors. And that's what she's doing. I mean, let me be clear. Jenna's done 9 debates. And she is a working mom who also is holding office right now. But having to be at every single forum every single night, to me, is not disqualifying. It shows me that she has a different way to get to voters. Who are the ones that actually go to these forums that sometimes aren't even televised? I mean, we're not talking about televised forums. We're talking about ones that are small, local neighborhood forums, which I love. But as a statewide candidate, it's hard to get to all of those while also talking to voters who are not just the ones who are the choir, the ones who show up to all of these debates time and time and time again. I like her strategy. Quite frankly, I wish I would have done more of saying no to forums like my opponent did, who's now the mayor, and get boots to the ground and get out there and get into the community.
Does that produce the right result, though?
I would have loved to win, but I think so. Who is in these? It's the same people every time, Cole. Didn't you get sick of talking to the same folks day after day after day who showed up at every single forum?
You have to engage.
Yeah.
And you have to articulate your views.
Yeah.
And I think, I look at somebody like Phil Weiser,
Yeah.
who has been all over our state.
Yeah.
Phil holds events all the time. Phil goes to forums.
Not debates, though. It's his own events,
he's
which
been
I
to-
agree with. I love those.
I think he's been to plenty of debates as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
But I think if you are running to be the chief legal officer of our state, and frankly, the head lawyer for a large law firm that does very, very important work for our state, I, as a voter, want to hear that person articulate their vision.
Yeah.
And that is going to happen in multiple conversations throughout our state.
Yes.
I don't know how visible she's been out on the Western Slope where I grew up.
She's been there.
But props to her if she's been out there. But I just want to see more candidate forums with more candidate participation and not having candidates sit in an ivory tower or in isolation or in a camera at MS Now articulating why they should be an elected official.
I have no problem with her being on air, but I think you're right. Like, there needs to be an agreement of what forums we're going to have. They need to be covered by the media, to be honest with you, so that we can see the difference in the candidates. At the end of the day, I think someone wants someone who they know is going to stand up to Trump and the MAGA extremists and what they are doing to Colorado, but it's also going to fight for things like our water rights. We're looking at a drought right now, right? Also going to fight for our ability, our voting rights, and any other issues that come up that, quite frankly, we can't even think about because of what's drummed up in Washington that Colorado needs to defend. And I would like to see them have those conversations, and I know it will happen. But let me tell you what's bugging me.
Yeah, tell me. Lay it on me.
What I call the white bro crew, the white podcast bro crew, who went off on tangents, had all the evidence, had all the data that they needed to show that this president would do exactly what he's doing today, if not maybe just stopping just short, but really knew what he was going to fight for, how he was going to fight, how he was going to do it, how he treats women, how he treats people, and still stumped for him to millions and millions of voters, right? And are now, like Tucker Carlson, going and apologizing to people saying, oops, we got it wrong. I don't know if I want to hear it. I don't know if I want to hear it. And also not supporting candidates that would be on the other side of him that are running against him.
Why don't we show some of these people some grace, okay? And Tucker Carlson is a very talented guy. I did watch his, I guess we'll call it the mea culpa speech last week. I think it was sincere. I think he personally feels badly about the fact that he got some of these things wrong with respect to Trump.
Yeah.
But I mean, if ultimately people come to see the light about Trump, what do we care what their journey is so long as they get to the right place?
To me, it depends on what is it apology because they're trying to save face or are they actually going to do something to fix it? And I haven't seen the let's do something to fix it. I've just seen kind of the whining out there. I feel differently about Marjorie Taylor Greene, honestly. Like, I think she's very interesting and I do listen to her when she comes on TV. I'd like to know what she has to say. I feel like she's coming from a place of values, but, agree to disagree on this one. Like, I just don't really want to hear it from them. I really don't. But I hear what you're saying, and I do think at the end of the day, we do need to give some grace.
So let me tie back in this issue with the first one we talked about, and that is one of the reasons why Donald Trump benefited so much from the bro podcast world was because Donald Trump went on Joe Rogan, Donald Trump went on these programs and talked.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of criticism of Kamala Harris for not doing that same kind of dialogue. So,
but that's exactly the opposite of what you were saying. Instead of being in community forums where he wouldn't go, which she was, she didn't do the podcast. And I do think that was a mistake, to be honest with you. But I'm saying that that's the point. Like, I like candidates who have these alternate strategies to reach voters that are not just community forums, where they're not just sitting in places where people who aren't working or don't have, kids and lives can actually access the person who's running for office. I actually agree that these podcasts and these types of social media forums are exactly where we need to be. And I think that's why we're here today having these conversations.
And for me, it's more of a visibility thing, that someone shouldn't try to run out the clock when they're running for office. They feel like they're ahead. And maybe that's just a strategy thing. And I'll, certainly defer to her campaign manager. If she wins her election, I guess it was the right strategy. But I think it begs the question, is it the right thing for the voters?
There you go. Thank you so much for listening. This episode of Politics is Personal is brought to you by Hamburger Mary's and Champagne Tiger, hosted by Leslie Herod and Cole Wist. This episode featured Tony Kovaleski and was directed by Julie Jackson, edited by Jamison Johnson, and produced by Leslie Herod, Cole Wist, Ian Silveri, and Julie Jackson. Special thanks to my Park Hill neighbors with the tandem bike, Hamburger Mary's, Champagne Tiger, Denver Community Media, and Frida Slave. Music by JKK. Recorded at Denver Community Media. All rights reserved.